A report from Group 17 by Robert C. O'Brien, Chapter 3. The odd thing about the household was that it worked. Improbable as it had seemed at first, even to her, impossible and annoyingly perverse to her friends, relatives, and especially her in-laws. There were disadvantages, she would admit, to a widow living alone in the woods with her 3 children, but there were disadvantages to being a widow wherever you lived. And after Andrew died in the crash, his parents, who were well-to-do, had invited her to come and live with them in their big house in Washington. Temporarily, of course, but to stay as long as she liked until she found a nice apartment and, if she wanted it, a job. As it turned out, she found the job first, and it was not in the city, but out in the country where they lived, in the new medical clinic the county had built. Dr. Lewis, who treated her for shock after her husband's death, had remembered her and told her about it. She kept track of appointments and mailed out bills. The pay was not high, but the work was easy, and the commuting only 10 minutes over a pretty country road. Most of all, she had been unable to face the thought of being cheerful, for the children's sake, in a cheerless place, a strange house, a new apartment. The job made it possible to stay in the place Andrew and she had loved together. She saw as she came in that John had split the wood for the fireplace and stacked it neatly on the back porch. Poor John. His conscientiousness at 14 really always made her feel like crying. Allison's bicycle was sprawled out where she had leaped off. Willis was at the door to meet her. How was school? It was good. Miss Davis read us a book, only she didn't finish it. She went to the kitchen, saw that someone, almost certainly John again, had put away the breakfast dishes she had left in the rack. She decided on veal chops for dinner. Veal chops, rice, and broccoli. There was cake for dessert. That's nice. What was the book? I forget. It's about a girl that lived in the mountains, but I forget her name. Heidi? That's right! Willis was astonished. How did you guess? I read the book once myself. It's a very famous book. Did Allie read it? I expect so. I think she has a copy on her bookshelf. Can I borrow it? Ask her, but not now. Let her do her homework. There was a letter for her addressed in blue ink. Mrs. Jennifer Adam, RFD, number 2, in a familiar hand from Mrs. George Adam in Washington. Her mother-in-law phoned once a week and wrote once a month. It could wait until after dinner. The household had worked at first, or so she thought. Then, because they had been forced together like people after a shipwreck, all bereft by the loss, needing each other's presence, so short a time ago it seemed. Yet it was 14 months now, and she realized that the pervading sadness had dissipated almost entirely. The empty chair, the empty bed were always present, and they were aware of them. Yet there was as much joy, no more and no less, in the house and in the barn and the pasture as there had been before. It was not her doing. She wondered at it at first, but no more. It was his. The staunchness of spirit, the unwavering independence which had prompted him to buy this house in the woods in the first place, had been inherited or otherwise acquired or learned. How could one tell? By his children, and from them somehow by her. Disaster had submerged them only momentarily. Like corks, they had bobbed up again immediately to the same buoyance as before. The household was there a better word for it? Stalwart. The house was not really in the woods, but near the edge of it. They had bought it, along with 60 acres of land, which would, they hoped, increase in value, yet they bought it not as an investment, but because it had the quality of remoteness that Andrew sought. From its windows no other habitation could be seen, and since the road came to an end in mud and river not far beyond them, scarcely ever did a car drive by. Of the acres, about 10 were cleared, and these they had kept over the past 14 years, a jumble of animals, horses, and on these they had kept over the past 14 years a jumble of animals, horses, ponies, dogs, cats, a lamb, rabbits, chickens. A nearby farmer had even once given them a baby pig, which became a pet, and at maturity would still come running along with the dogs when whistled for. It squealed as it came, and it was John's theory at age 8 that it thought it was a dog, and that the squeals were barks. The veal chops, salted, were in the pan. The rice and broccoli were boiling. She called John and Allison to set the table and then to eat. Willis asked Allison if he might borrow her book. What book? Hiding? His mother said. Willis, it's Heidi. Heidi! What do you want it for? To read? You can't read. I can read, work, and play. Yes, but Heidi's harder. Let him borrow it for a little while to look at the pictures. Okay, but don't color in it. John changed the subject. Big Henry came to call. She sighed. What did he bring this time? Nothing, only an offer of his services. Oh, what kind? He wanted to know if you'd like him to plow the garden again. What did you say? I told him you would be delighted, that your gratitude would be unbounded. And what did he say to that? He said he'd be around early evening one day this week when she'd dried up some. I'd have more gratitude if he'd let me pay him. A smile is all the pay he seeks. It was true, Big Henry, whose last name was Carpenter, was a slightly retarded member of a rambling local family. Some of the Carpenters were on relief, some were small farmers, some worked on the roads. One of the most prosperous was a building contractor. Henry, nearly 40, had never been married. The sight of a pretty widow could set him dancing, though he was in fact too shy ever to look directly at her, but stared always at the sky over her shoulder, letting his peripheral vision do its best. He brought her presents of fresh corn and venison, bass, quail in season. He was at present her only male admirer, and that was one of the disadvantages of living in a house in the woods. After the autopsy on the chimpanzee was finished, Dr. Schultz left his assistant to complete the cremation, and walked alone over the part of the wall where the noise had come from. There was nothing to be seen on his side, and the wall itself was too high to scale or see over without a ladder. Standing back, however, he observed that a good-sized young tree, an aspen, had grown up close to the wall on the other side. Some of its branches, newly green with spring leaves, passed through the ironwork on top. That should not be, he thought. A tree could serve as a ladder, and the purpose of this wall was to keep intruders out. He should complain to Kublitz, who would have the tree removed. At such things, Kublitz, who had a passion for security, would be efficient. Then he had a second thought. It would perhaps be better to find out first who or what had been in the tree. It might have been just an animal. There was a large animal native to these woods that climbed trees. Buteratl. What was it in English? A possum. If it was the person, that would be much more interesting. Someone watching, someone spying. Interesting, but not alarming. Nothing that he and Georg Wolter were doing, seen from such a vantage point, would provide even a clue to the nature of their research, especially to an ordinary observer, especially to one who could not possibly have any idea who he, Helmuth Schultz, was. He thought a moment, and then set out along the wall, walking parallel to it. There was a faint remainder of a path through this part of the grounds, though this part of the grounds was at present almost entirely unused. He went quickly, for the daylight was fading, and he would not be able to see much longer. There it was, ahead, as he had thought, an iron gate, double, heavily barred and hooked with a chain, but not locked, again to keep intruders out rather than the occupants in. A driveway with a thin coating of gray, pebbly gravel led back from the gate into the woods, off to his left, in the direction of the big house. From the house itself, on the other side of the grounds, he had seen it emerge from the woods. It led to the back door, perhaps originally a service entrance. He did not know. He slid the bar back and unhooked the chain. The gate opened inward. Though disused, it swung easily and silently on its hinges. He pulled it in only a foot, enough to slip through. Outside, he found himself on a rough gravel road, to the left leading steeply uphill, to his right running parallel to the wall in the direction he had just come from. He could see the aspen tree, and beyond it, where the road deteriorated into a delta of muddy ruts as it reached the low, marshy land that bordered the river, the Potomac. It was wide here, flowing sluggishly toward Washington, the capital of this country, in which he, a stranger, an alien, a double alien, did not belong at all. At the base of the tree he studied the ground. Because of shade from the wall and the foliage, it was only sparsely grown up in the weeds, and it was soft, even in twilight. It took no skill to see that what had made the noise was human. There were a confusion of footprints, but one pair, between the wall and the tree trunk, were deeply impressed. They were clearly made by someone who had landed hard, someone wearing tennis shoes, and there was no heel. More interesting, they were narrow, almost certainly those of a woman or girl who for some reason had been watching him from the top of the wall. Still thinking, he found a dead branch lying near the roadside, and scraped the ground, obliterating the deep prints and leaving that patch of earth softer than the rest. He decided against saying anything to Kublitz for the time being. And that is the end of chapter 3.